If it howls like a Nazi and it goosebumps like a Nazi, it's a Nazi. And maybe with Daryl Cooper or whatever his name is, maybe he doesn't goosebumps and he doesn't hail, but his rhetoric is pretty much as Nazi or as Nazi apologist as you could get. Now he hides it behind, well, I'm trying to just have a comprehensive view. I'm just trying to understand it. Today we've covered Daryl Cooper some time ago when he was on Tucker Carlson, but now he was invited on Joe Rogan, who is apparently a big fan. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me today is Alex. And before we even get into anything, I want to play just a little bit of Joe Rogan and the way he sort of speaks about Daryl Cooper.
Now marred forever with this ugly stain of being not just an anti-Semite, but a Nazi apologist. That's what I read. Nazi apologist. Like, you can't say that unless you listen to his stuff. You can't. Unless they listen to your work, they can't say that because they don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Now, when I start calling someone a Nazi apologist or even anything close to a Nazi, it's usually after I watch something from them, and we'll go to a little bit of what Daryl Cooper said on when he was on Tucker Carlson show or the Tucker show, and we'll go through a little bit of what he said on Joe Rogan itself when he tried to be sort of less provocative or he's just misunderstood. But Alex, I'm not sure if you were on the episode when we covered him originally, but what do you make of both of his appearances? Just sort of in general, we'll go through a few clips, but yeah, what do you make of Daryl Cooper and Joe Rogan's platforming of him?
Okay, so there is a reality that I could imagine me quite enjoying somebody like Daryl Cooper. Do you remember a little bit about the Howard Stern show? So back in the day, Howard Stern used to have all of these bizarre characters onto his radio show, and really just deplorable, disgusting people. And I could see like Daryl Cooper being sort of poked fun of and interviewed by somebody like that, where I would find it to be totally like, oh, it's show business, baby, right? But it's this sort of like, I mean, to call him a historian, I think, is a real insult to just anybody that's ever picked up any kind of a book. And he seems to think that it's only Jews who care about preserving the history of World War II. Not anybody else, okay? Not anybody maybe from Eastern Europe, not anybody from the United States even. I mean, in his opinion, the only people who don't like Nazis or who would use Nazi as a kind of a slur is Jews and maybe, well, I guess like, the pro-Russian kind of apologists, but besides them, whereas, I mean, there's just an entire group of historians that have been dedicating their lives to researching this and writing about it. And I really enjoy, Neil Ferguson, Victor Davis Hanson on the Hoover Institution, when I listen to them really go through it, because they write history. They write history kind of books that are very accessible to sort of your average person. Which maybe I feel is the sort of sick, depraved kind of gap that Daryl is kind of filling.
Yeah, and to sort of talking about the sort of World War II legacy, we of course have the Global Day Against Fascism, which is sort of meant to be broadly against all the victims of fascism. And in Slovakia, as you mentioned, the Eastern Europe, we celebrate the Slovak National Uprising because Slovakia was joined with the Nazis during the Second World War. But even then, some stood up, and there was unfortunately small-lived, but there was an uprising in Slovakia which stood up against the Nazi regime. Now, when you wanna sort of find a neo-Nazi in Slovakia, usually they put up a black flags on that day, basically saying as oh, this wasn't really. And when you ask them, well, you know, they say something like, well, there was just like innocent victims, but they should have waited. They should have waited for the Soviet army or the allies to come in. Basically, they shouldn't stood up to Nazism. We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. And since I want to go through at least a few clips. Let's go to what he said originally on the Tucker show, where he was afterwards said that he is a Nazi apologist. We'll watch through the whole clip. It's about 90 seconds.
I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. You know, Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth, that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You know, you have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now?
So before we even cover what was said, first of all, thank you again, Jonathan, for super chat. I didn't read it. He said Team Alex, definitely. And also a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. Someone says he kind of backtracked on this take. On Joe Rogan at the start, he pretty much said he still considers Churchill a chief villain because he created the World War II from a regional war. You know, we should have just let the Nazis and the Soviets sort of rape and take over Poland, and you know, all the Jews that were there and all the Poles and all the gypsies and all the gays. Well, kind of sucks for them, I guess, is the way pretty much Daryl Cooper would look at it. So yeah, he said Churchill is a primary responsible for World War II. So basically blaming the victims, the people who stand up to Nazism, the people who stand up to totalitarianism, those are the ones who are actually starting it. And you know, if after the Poles they went after the Yugoslavs and after the Greeks and whoever is after, well, you know, we cannot start World War II, so we're just gonna let that. And also the fact that, you know, after Operation Barbarossa, when Soviet Union was invaded, we just don't have where to put these people. I guess we just have to commit genocide. I mean, Alex, I guess genocide is more humane, is what he is basically saying.
Operation Barbarossa was in summer 1941. All of the kind of the actual, you know, persecution and the Holocaust of the Jews and of, you know, political dissidents and of course of homosexuals, that started years before, and that was domestic. You know, that they started first of all with their own population. And so Operation Barbarossa, which is, you know, really, I think one of just the most, I mean, you can appreciate it just from a kind of a military perspective. Who on earth, I mean, it was very dumb. I mean, who on earth invades the Soviet Union? I mean, it's crazy. But still, it's sort of like if you complete. I mean, it's no connection to the history of actually what happened. Maybe he thinks Operation Barbarossa was maybe like, I don't know, like it was something that's the real Barbarossa started 7 years ago in Buchenwald in, Germany, and it was a long Operation Barbarossa or something. It's just complete nonsense. And yeah, sure, if you're history, when you're looking at kind of World War II and the events that led up to it, it's one of these things that has such a wealth of information and sources available. So if you have, let's say, 1.5 million pieces of information, you could probably find two pieces of, single like lines of information out of all of these pieces of information that would be kind of strange or anomalies or whatever, or that might present a completely opposing opinion. But then, you'd have to then say, okay, I'm going to take this, I'm going to ignore all of the other, millions of things that we know. Also, he accuses the Germans of not being prepared, of not having a plan. I mean, I think the Nazis would find that quite insulting. They were meticulous record keepers. They were meticulous in their planning. That was the whole kind of point of why it was so brutal, is because it wasn't just a random genocide. It was a very, it's not like you and I get into a fight in a bar and I pick up a glass and I smash it over your head and kill you. No, it's planned, it's well thought out, it was methodical. So, I mean, Daryl's not even a very good Nazi, in my opinion. He's kind of like, the Nazis were like these kind of weak losers that couldn't even plan the Holocaust right.
Yeah, let's listen to what he said actually on Joe Rogan, where again Joe Rogan said that as soon as people knew Daryl Cooper is coming on the show, they wanted to sort of cancel it, they wanted to come out against it. I mean, imagine people don't want for someone to spread like neo-Nazi propaganda. But let's listen to a little bit on what he said on Joe Rogan.
I mean, the interesting thing about the World War II question is something I found through talking to people who, disagreed with my Tucker interview, is like, if you put the question to them, and maybe if you put it directly like this, they would give you a different answer, but you kind of get the, you get to understand that this is how they feel about it, which is, if there was two options, one of them is that the Second World War doesn't happen, at least in Europe, 40 million people don't get killed, but, the National Socialists stay in power, and, maybe Hitler dies 10 years later, it's like the Soviet Union, Stalin dies, and things move on. People really kind of feel like, and maybe this is because they're not involved in it, like 40 million dead people, that was a cost worth paying. And I think that is completely insane, man. Like,
yeah, so basically what he's trying to say here is that World War II should have been avoided because people died. And, if Stalin wants to, during Holodomor, wants to kill tens of millions of people, and if Hitler wants to kill millions of people in his concentration camps, and then first from his own country, then started importing them from other countries, and then continuing and killing more and more people, then that's like local politics. You shouldn't like meddle in the politics of like another nation. But if we want to stand up against totalitarianism, if we want to kill some Nazis and kill some, well, we didn't kill any Soviets, but when we want to sort of focus on destroying these totalitarian regimes, that's going too far. Now you're inflicting harm, you are like spreading more hate, you are, I mean, this is exactly what he's saying. He's saying that Nazis and Soviets killing their own people in the terms of tens of millions is preferable to basically us destroying these savage regimes. I mean, that's why he calls Churchill the chief villain. That's why he calls that everything Allies did was a war crime. I mean, Alex, what other what other analysis can I even take from what he is trying to say here?
Uh, I mean, what about all of the kind of invading that had been going on? Yeah, what about all of the other what about all of the other things that were happening at the time? All of the kind of invading other countries, taking them over, putting the population, like the Polish population, into forced labor camps. What was that? Was it just kind of, well, that's the cost of doing business, really is. I mean, so what? You have like a few million people in some labor camps, big deal. I mean, you want people to be productive, and they can ask the Germans to do it. Hello, they just went through World War One. They're tired. They need to have a slave population. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It's sort of a,
Yeah, and just quickly, not to mention that Germany was recovering, and it was the Nazis who obstructioned everything that was happening in Germany in the politics sphere to gain more political power and to sort of go into power again when things were recovering.
Oh, Daniel, I mean, come on. Stop coming around here with your anti-Nazi Churchill apology. It's really it's horrible. I mean, Churchill uh declared war on Nazi Germany, right? He did that. He actually declared war on them, and then that caused the deaths of millions of people. If Churchill would have just stayed at home and knitted or something and let, I don't know, Neville Chamberlain give up all of France and half of, I don't know, let them have Guernsey, let them have the Isle of Man. Yeah, then everything would have been just fine. It's this sort of that, and that's really the problem with having a show like Joe Rogan that is taking itself seriously, because like I said, I am maybe I'm taking it a little bit too lighthearted, but do you not see a kind of, in a sort of when making, when I take that example of Howard Stern and all of the crackpots that he used to have on, truly terrible, terrible, awful people, that there, but he did it in a way that was just mocking them. And it was with and it was outrageous, but it didn't this is almost being presented like it is the news. Okay, that Daryl Cooper sitting has been going through bizarre kind of like the archives from the cutting room, like the stuff they were like, okay, that'll go in the archive, that'll go in the archive, oh, that's garbage, just throw it in the trash. And then Daryl Cooper digs it out and goes through it and kind of comes up with some new revelations. That's sort of what it feels like. But that is what's rewarded, unfortunately, is these types of intellectual discussions, these I don't know, you kind of, it's an obviously it's an anti-intellectual discussion, it's an anti-truth discussion. You could easily get on Joe Rogan if you're just going to come up with some really bizarre kind of theory about the world, like maybe we're floating on a big marshmallow or something, and you come and you say, I have proof. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
fine, yeah. You get a show.
yeah, and again, look at why he was invited there. People can watch the whole thing if they really hate themselves. But yeah, at the start he says he watches him a lot, and he considers him, someone who cares for life, someone who really goes into the weeds, really goes into like deep into the stuff. We have a super chat from Bull Moose. Thank you so much. He's asking, do you think he or others like him genuinely think this, or is he just making it to get more exposure because of controversy? I mean, when it comes to people like him, they might be just sort of like grifters and not really think that, but people who listen to them are genuinely believing in that, and that gets itself into politics. But many people in the chat are now arguing against Ukrainian war effort, which I found interesting, especially since we haven't mentioned Ukraine or Russia at all. We only talked about Soviet Union. But this is where it goes. People start taking that and then start saying the similar thing when it comes to Putin. Basically, we should appease Putin. We shouldn't let him have some things. We do not want to start World War III. We just have to appease dictators just a little bit more. How is it like 90% of Never Chamberlains? If they just appease Hitler a little bit more, they would have achieved world peace. That we are just one appeasement
just
short of
very
world
close.
peace.
Yeah, very, very close. We're very close indeed. But that in a way, it's very good for business. If you're going to think about Joe Rogan as just being a character on television, then this kind of stuff is good. It's good show business, right? It's totally. I always remember. I kind of said a few times that I think that Piers Morgan is like Jerry Springer, in a way, in the kind of people that he would have on. And Joe Rogan is like if Howard Stern thought that he was an investigative journalist. You know what I mean? Like Howard Stern had, I think one time he spoke to an actual serial killer live on his show. And, I mean, wow. I mean, that is pretty insane. But Joe Rogan, unfortunately, would, sit down with the serial killer and then try to sort of make it like, well, those women, they just should not have been. I mean, they shouldn't have been walking there. Ridiculous. You're a serial killer. They should have known. They should have stayed inside. I mean, it's that kind of thing. Anti-intellectual, anti-concepts, I suppose. And complete nonsense.
We also have a super chat from Christian. Thank you so much. He says, let me guess, this guy also says today that the West should not escalate against Putin, but kudos to Team Daniel and Alex. Thank you so much. And another super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. I hope, thankfully, the way human brain works is sometimes it does, sort of filter out all the traumatic experiences, or at least tries to. So I don't remember anything from the original Tucker show where he invited Daryl Cooper. So I don't know how much they sort of talked about sort of like modern politics. But the important part is that it's about principles. You don't even have to talk about how we have to appease Putin. You just have to say, well, we should have appeased Hitler in the past, and that automatically translates to basically we should appease all dictators all the time. So you don't even have to sort of you just incline people a certain way and they take the last step, which is sort of what his position was on Kristallnacht. But we are already out of time. Maybe this deserves another show, especially if I can find more stuff, because like the whole thing and this whole Joe Rogan phenomena, as you mentioned, I think needs to be talked about. This sort of, I'm just asking questions, I'm just inviting people
that is
to
insidious.
talk.
Probably like my kind of final thought would be, I have no problem with interviewing Putin if it's done in a way like Charlie Rose interviewing Bashar al-Assad, right? That was a great interview. I thought that it was illuminating. I thought it was important. That is the way that you should be interviewing these kinds of people, right? To have them to properly interrogate their ideas and to sort of expose them for what they are. And instead we sort of have it as if this is 60 minutes or something, or if that this is kind of like, I just to kind of mention before everybody is going, Walter Duranty, very famous journalist from the New York Times. During the Holodomor, he went to the Soviet Union, won a Pulitzer, and I think that his famous headline was that the Soviets are hungry, but they're not starving. Okay, so I think it's really important to actually speak the truth. And it may take a few years before all of this is really revealed for the insidious nonsense that it is. And I think that it's very important just to continue to expose it, as I hope we're doing.
So we have the reality show coming up, but first, Alex, you want to mention something?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yes. So if anybody wants to come and hear me speak at night, it's in 1 hour after the reality show, I'm going to be doing a live stream that Daniel will be sharing in the chat with an Israeli woman. I look forward to seeing everybody
So yeah,
there.
people can check that out after the reality show, and it starts right after the reality show, which the reality show starts in just about a few minutes. We're going to be talking about Mahmoud Khalil a bit more, specifically the people who are coming out in support of him. With that, thank you, Alex, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.